Over the last few years, some of my favorite coffees have come from Brazil. Brazil is usually synonymous with kind of low acid, nutty tasting coffees that are best suited for the base of an espresso or other utility applications, which is true. They are great at that, but it's not wholly true. This reputation often causes a lot of people to overlook, a lot of specialty coffee roasters especially, the unique opportunity that Brazilian can offer their single origin lineup. So today we are going to take a look at the Fazenda Engenho, which is a really, really wonderful coffee from Brazil. The Brazil Fazenda Engenho was grown by Maria Celia Chaeb de Sousa, right around the 1,000 meters above sea level mark, which for Brazil is pretty high. And the entire lot is comprised of coffee that was picked from yellow catuai plants. And under processing, you will see that this coffee is natural fermentation yeast, which is not exactly what we normally think of when we talk about naturally processed coffee. So, natural yeast fermentation processing utilizes a controlled fermentation period, and that's used to break down the coffee cherry and the mucilage of the seeds. And rather than using a commercially cultivated yeast strain, a natural yeast starter is taken from the must of a previous batch of coffee. And that's the yeast that drives the fermentation for about 48 to 60 hours before the coffee is removed from the tank. And this is a way of processing. It mirrors kind of a similar technique that is often used in winemaking, where some winemakers opt to use a natural local yeast for the fermentation. And this is different from naturally processing kind of the traditional coffee processing, where the cherry and the mucilage is left on the seed, but it's dried from the sun, usually like on a patio or a raised bed. And this is a coffee that we weren't really looking for when we first cupped the sample, but it had a fold of complexity to it that kept me coming back to it to the point where we added it to the lineup. And that's because there's a lot to love about this coffee. It has the hallmark characteristics that we're looking for in a high quality Brazilian coffee. It's got a milder acidity, a smooth body, and a mellow nutty quality to it. But once you kind of get past that like macro Brazil flavor profile, this coffee really opens up. And I particularly love the acidity. The acidity in this coffee is really kind of like sparkly and has this delicious orange liqueur kind of quality to it. And the body's super smooth, and it has a lot of complexity to the balance, which sounds weird, but what I mean by that is all the tasting notes, the levels of acidity, the body, all the constituent parts that create the coffee's flavor, they harmonize really well, but not to be mistaken as being simple. They just balance well and work together. The acidity and parts of the aftertaste have enough punch to keep it interesting, and it kind of almost tastes like an old-fashioned. It's got those notes of orange liqueur and gentian, which is the primary herb used in Angostura bitters. And the body's really smooth, it's sweet, it has notes of kind of caramelized sugar and baker's chocolate. And the result is something that really tastes great, but also should be really functional. It should be a great coffee behind your coffee bar, whether it's in an air pot, you're doing it as a pour over, however you want to use this is going to taste great. And it should be a really good fit for anyone that's kind of looking for a coffee that's maybe a little bit safer, or maybe they have an averse kind of reaction to the punch of higher acidity coffees, but it's still super interesting. So I really recommend you give it a try. If Brazilian coffee is not your thing, try this one out. It's kind of like that perfect Goldilocks zone of it's interesting, it's super smooth, it's got a lot that keeps me interested as someone who's been in coffee for a long time, but it should be like a great kind of gateway drug too for a lot of coffee drinkers. So it's in the catalog, check it out. If you want a sample, drop me a line. Take care.